Good evening.
Well, before we start our conversation, let's see what our journalists have dug up about Surkov. Please pay attention.
The former aide to the dictator of the Russian Federation, Vladimir Putin, Vladislav Surkov, has fled Russia. Reportedly, he was afraid of repression. This was reported by the Russian Z channel Diaries of a Scout, citing its own sources. The former influential Kremlin official Vladislav Surkov, who was previously called the Kremlin's Grey Cardinal and one of the architects of the Russian world concept, has, according to sources, himself fallen victim to the very system he helped create. It is reported that Russian security services are investigating his possible involvement in the embezzlement of funds allocated by the Kremlin for the occupation of Ukraine's Donbas region from 2014 to 2020. In particular, it is reported
Surkov hastily left the territory of the Russian Federation. The reason for his evacuation was information about upcoming materials that could form the basis of a criminal case. Security forces have allegedly been given the green light to develop cases related to overseeing the Ukrainian direction.
According to sources, former aide to the president of the Russian Federation, Vladislav Surkov, may be hiding either in the United Arab Emirates or in one of the Latin American countries. It is noted that he chose a country that does not have an extradition agreement with Moscow. Nevertheless, as sources claim, the former official may be put on the wanted list in the near future. At the same time, the authors of the Intelligence Officers' Diaries project claimed that a new wave of pressure has begun in Russia against high-ranking figures who were at the origins of the aggression against Ukraine and the promotion of the so-called Russian world ideology. According to them, Surkov's story is just one such episode.
Surkov's departure coincided with yet another wave of purges among the old elites and officials who were involved in shaping the ideology of previous years. It
should be noted that there is no official confirmation of this information yet. After 2020, Vladislav Surkov fell out of favor with the Kremlin, was removed from his position as Vladimir Putin's aide, and effectively disappeared from the public sphere. At the same time, Surkov is considered one of the key architects of Russia's hybrid aggression against Ukraine. It is reported that he personally oversaw the Kremlin's policy toward Ukraine, including the occupation of Crimea and parts of Donbas, and also participated in negotiations on the so-called Minsk process.
Olga Kurnosova is joining us on air. Olga, hello again. Where did Surkov go? What do you really think happened to him?
Surkov himself says that he doesn't know where he is. Yes, that's very interesting. Today his comments have already appeared saying that he can't comment on his departure in any way. But it's clear that in the dead end, let's be honest, that Putin has found himself in with a full-scale war going on for more than 4 years, and Putin seeing no end in sight. And the problems piling up like a snowball, of course. There's a desire to look for someone to blame. And they are looking for scapegoats from all sides. On one hand, of course, it's Surkov, because if, as we know, the money for all of Putin's henchmen in Ukraine, yes, all those Medvedchuks and others, was funneled through him, then he's an obvious target. And Putin was being told that the red carpets had already been rolled out, and there was bread and salt prepared on an epic scale, and everyone was just waiting for Putin to arrive. It turned out that none of this was true. So it means that all the money Putin poured in here was stolen by those very same Medvedchuks, of course, together with Surkov himself. He was the curator after all, he was the one overseeing where the money was being spent. So I wouldn't be at all surprised if he really is being held accountable. But on the other hand, this week we also see a criminal case against Ruslan Salykov. Yes, of course, for now his patrons managed to persuade them and he's under house arrest. But still, that's Shoigu's right-hand man, and on the other hand, they're closing in on them too, yes. In other words, Putin is looking for someone to blame for his failure in Ukraine.
Mm-hmm. Well, in general, Olga Vladimirovna, according to your information, how active is the current purge, let's say, of the elites who were beneficiaries, well, not beneficiaries, but participants in this failure, who reported the wrong information, came up with the wrong ideas or misallocated budgets? There has already been a lot said about Kozak, about how he was supposedly against the start of the full-scale invasion because he was trying to resolve something with the Minsk agreements. Are there any other names that can be mentioned here? And to what extent is Putin currently occupied with this issue?
In fact, a significant number of people were strongly opposed to the invasion. Furthermore, another important point to consider is that we always recall that very meeting without ever really exploring it in much depth or detail, right? I mean, the Security Council, when Putin made everyone swear allegiance, because at first, after Putin's speech, Papatrushev said that they needed to wait, and Mishustin agreed with him. And only after that did Putin explode at Naryshkin. And Kozak was cut out of that very meeting entirely so that no one would know what he had said there. So yes, even some of those whom we would consider hawks were against it because they understood that Russia was getting involved in a very complicated campaign from which it was unclear how they would get out later. And in fact, even Patrushev himself has lost his positions as well. And if Mishustin is still in his position for now, it's simply because in the economy, things are a complete mess. That's why Putin keeps the systemic liberals at the helm of economic processes, understanding that if he starts moving them as well, the economy will simply collapse and Russia, along with its military budgets, will go under. So yes, they're searching everywhere, searching a lot. But again, we know from history that any dictatorship over time increasingly ramps up the machinery of repression and starts imprisoning those closest to the dictator. That's how all dictatorships work. That's how the dictatorship under Stalin operated. So why should things be any different under Putin? Of course, under Putin, it's the same story. Everyone knows the story of how Stalin executed the top military leadership, for example, right before the start of World War II.